Welcome everybody, and thank you for coming today. We're quite excited to meet with everybody and get more people back in the room. And we're privileged to be here and have you guys, and honored for you to be here. I'm Paul Henderson with Great Transitions. Lynn Henderson's here, she's checking in people. And we're the founders of Great Transitions. And that's a service we developed for guiding people as they transition from their, as we say, their lifelong home to the next place they call home. That the home that we're in may not always be the best place for us, or the way it's set up today may not be the best way it should be set up. So we work with families as they decide what they're going to do. If they're staying in the home, that's fine. We work with them to, we bring in resources to help them do things in the house to make it safer, so they can stay there longer. Or if they're choosing to leave and go to a community, we'll work with families to decide what community they're going to go to, and then handle everything soup to nuts in that transition to the community. And at the end of the day, Lynn Henderson and I are realtors with the real estate firm next door, and we handle everything on the sale of the property also. Today we're going to talk about continuing care communities. And I want to get right into it because it's quite a bit of subject matter. And so let's get started. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So Taylor.
Hi, good morning. My name is Taylor Womack. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at the Mayflower Winter Park.
Hi, I'm Megan Williams with Westminster Winter Park, Sales Director there.
So when we talk about continuing care retirement community, I know I have different names, but what does the continuum of care mean?
So the continuum of care means independent living, assisted living, memory care, long-term care, and skilled. So it's all levels of care on one campus. You can enter through various stages of it, but when you hear continuing care, it's a full continuum, also synonymous with life plan.
And so that's one of the tenets of your type of community.
Yes.
And both of our panelists are work with those communities. Megan's with Westminster Winter Park, Taylor's with the Mayflower Winter Park. So, Taylor, when we talk about a life plan contract, can you kind of tell us what that's about?
Yeah, so at a life plan community, you are signing a contract that guarantees your placement in care, and it also is at a predictable rate. And depending on the community, it depends on the care rate, but it's very predictable when you're planning for your future and you're planning for future care, because most of the time everyone knows that healthcare costs only go up and not down. So when you're formulating your plan, this is something that certainly helps, but it's purchasing care as well in today's dollars, really.
So that's another one of the major pieces of the community, going in a community like yours, is controlling long-term costs, correct?
Right.
So as we move forward, there's an upfront investment, and we're going to talk about some dollars in a minute, but Megan, what is it, people struggle with that. I mean, we hear that all the time. I couldn't possibly move to one of that kind of community because it's too expensive to move in. So what is the fee called? And why is it charged? What's it do?
Sure. So when you talk about an entry fee, people sometimes think it's a buy-in, and you don't own anything in either one of our communities. They're really type of a lease. So when you look at the continuing care, the upfront fee is really the contract that you're buying in the lifestyle. So when you look at making this choice, people struggle with that. The entry fees themselves have different types of refundable options, but it's really that piece of paper. And the entry fees will be equated to the unit choice. So depending on the size of the apartment or the home or villa that you choose, your entry fee will be based on that. The other thing that it does, when you pay the entry fee, when you move into one of our communities, you have the ability to access all the levels of care. So as Taylor was talking about, you're looking at making a plan for the future. That's why it's called Life Plan. And so when you come into the independent living, you know that you're guaranteed access and priority to those higher levels of care as a resident.
So Taylor, what, in Central Florida, what might that price range be for the entrance fee?
Yeah, I think it obviously really depends at the community that you're looking at. And as Megan mentioned, it depends on the refund plan and the square footage of the residence. But I think generally it probably starts around 150 to 180,000 and then goes up from there. A lot of communities offer a very high refund plan. I think I know some up to 95% of that entrance fee or that investment you're making in the beginning is refundable to you or your estate.
And then Megan, what about monthly rent?
So again, it depends on the type of community that you're looking at and the contract style, but the monthly service fees for independent living can range anywhere from $2,000 up to, for one person, up to $5,000 or more for two people. And again, that monthly service fee is going to equate with the type of unit. So looking at your different sizes from studio, one bedroom, two bedroom, villa, those monthly service fees will be equated to that as well.
So I want to touch on that for a minute. I know we're going to repeat some things here because this is kind of a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp. And I say that because it took me a long time to really get my arms around it. So let's go over it again. Why would somebody, I'm going to let both of you come back at this. Why would somebody put all that money down up front to go into your community when they can just go to another community and put down a small deposit and move in?
So I think depending on the contract, so there's different styles of contracts, and there's also a rental. So I think that's something that we haven't talked about. You can just pay a monthly service fee, but you don't always have the same services and amenities that are available. So with both of our communities, paying that entry fee is kind of looking at that unknown, and the what ifs, because nobody can really predict the future. But you can be in control of your future by making this plan. So by looking at that entry fee, you're really planning for your future and what you may need going forward.
Okay, Taylor?
Yeah, I think that, to piggyback off what Megan said, you know, the future is really unknown, and there's so many what ifs in life. The sudden illness of a spouse, a diagnosis, now we can add a global pandemic to the list, right? So I think that a life plan community helps you plan, obviously, for the future, and it's guaranteeing your placement in that community and in that care. And for a lot of people, obviously, they're looking for quality care, reputable care, and if you are not at a life plan community and you have an event that requires some care, you may get what's available, and that might not always be up to your standards. So I think that when you're formulating your plan and you're considering different communities, it's also important to consider that long-term care piece and making sure that you have peace of mind that when you do need care, and unfortunately statistically many people will, when you do need that care, that it's the quality that you deserve.
So one big difference is you have all levels of care. Independent, assisted,
Right.
skilled, memory care. Straight rental communities generally have 1, 2, maybe 3 levels of care. The next thing is that that care is guaranteed. So if there's an event, somebody falls and, or somebody just gets really sick and they come out of the hospital and they're having trouble walking because they're weak and they need to go to rehabilitation, is there a place for them in your community?
Yes, always. And sometimes people that had chosen to come into independent living have an event and they have fallen and they come to us through the long-term care. So they have those benefits of those services. And I think one of the other things that's important with the life plan communities is whether you're married or not, but in a married situation, if your spouse needed a higher level of care and you did, you're still able to be together because one could live in independent, one could live in assisted, or one in skilled nursing. So I think having that, because you can't plan the future, if that happens, you can still stay together.
And all levels of care are on the same campus?
Correct.
Okay.
They're just down the hallway or in a different building. So that's been, I think, really important because we have many couples that happens to, and you want everybody to be as independent as possible and to thrive, but we all age differently. So having that ability to share in each other's care and love is really nice down the hallway.
So essentially, you hold beds in rehab. You make sure there's availability
Yes.
for a resident.
Residents always come first because in our skilled nursing, somebody in the community can come to our rehabilitation for services. But if a resident needs that and there's somebody from the outside, we would always take the resident first.
And it's interesting, because of what Lynn and I do, we get phone calls. And somebody will call and say, my mom's in the hospital, they're trying to find a rehab bed. I think we had one recently. And, in fact, I referred it over to you guys. I sent it to you because they were looking at one of the communities, I remember. And they couldn't find a rehab bed anywhere. And the hospital's trying to release them. Well, if they'd been a resident of one of these communities, there would have been a rehab bed available for them. So they wouldn't have had that problem. The next thing I wanted to reiterate is the pricing. So I go into the community, or somebody here goes into the community today, or this year, and 3 years from now, their health declines and they need to go to assisted living. Obviously, prices will have increased in 3 years. Are they paying market rate at that point to go to assisted living?
No, so our residents always have an internal rate versus the market rate. So their rates are monthly service fees are less.
So Taylor, that rate, just so people know, that's all about how the contract goes, right?
Right. So at Life Plan Communities, it's a contract that lasts a lifetime, even if your health or your financial status changes. So, if, you were to outlive your money, you stay at the community no matter what level of care you're in.
Okay, and I'm gonna let Megan repeat that, because I think that's really important. You run out of money.
Yes, so, once you are approved for residency, if you outlive your resources in our type of community, we promise to take care of you. So going in ahead of time and planning for your future, like Taylor at the Mayflower, you know ahead of time that you are set for the future, and that peace of mind is it's priceless. It could be a MasterCard commercial.
Well, you're right, it could be a MasterCard commercial. So, I know we beat on that a little bit, but does that help you guys understand more what Life Care is all about? Perfect. Yes, they've got a microphone, and she'll hold the microphone.
For example, let's say I come to one of your communities and I pay $4,000 a month. And I need to go to the next level of care. Do I still pay $4,000 a month, or do I have to pay more per month?
So the question is, I'm gonna repeat the questions for purposes of the filming, is if the person is at the community and they go to the next level of care, is the price gonna change?
So, it depends on the contract. And we're a different contract than, the Mayflower. So, at our community, you would pay a little bit more for the assisted living.
But not necessarily market rate.
No,
Well, not market
never
rate.
market rate. But the fees would change, but it goes back to the contracts, which can get tricky. So, in general terms, looking at the lifestyle you've chosen in the community, your contract will dictate whether that happens or not.
And Taylor, you use,
At the Mayflower, it would depend what independent living residence you're in, but all of our residents pay the same amount for that care. So if you're in a 2,200 square foot residence, you may actually be paying less for care when you need assisted living, versus if you're in a 500 square foot residence, you may pay a little bit more for that assisted living rate, but all of our residents are paying the same amount for that care that's being rendered.
and the beauty here is that all your questions in great detail can get answered when you visit one of the communities. We don't have time here to answer all the details, because it does get somewhat complex. But I wanted to move on. So there's an entrance fee, it can be substantial, and how do people fund that entrance fee, Taylor?
Most of the time with the sale of their homes, is how the entrance fee is funded. And, it's hard to line that up perfectly, right? From closing on your home to moving into a Life Plan community. So I think a lot of communities are reasonable and flexible and offer some sort of promissory note. So that is doable. Sometimes people will sell investments, and work that out with their financial planners, but that's generally how the entrance fee is funded.
And we find that works very well, with the promissory notes. And Megan, do you want to say anything about promissory?
No, I think they have I mean, I think it's a great option, for people. I know, sometimes selling your home, you wanna move in, prior to, having your house sold, and sometimes the closing dates don't match up, so the promissory notes are a great option.
So, that moves into the next question, which is, our experience, and something that Lynn and I have worked very hard on in developing the system that we use, is that people move to the community first. So what's the advantage of moving to the community first?
So the benefit of moving to the community first is a couple things. I think change is hard no matter what age, and certainly making this decision is a big decision that neither one of us take lightly or know that prospects like you all consider and do. So when you make that decision to move, the next thing is, oh my gosh, I have so much stuff, what do I do to downsize, how do I get my home ready, keep it clean and everything else. So when we partner with you, like at Great Transitions, we work with them for the residents of when they want to move in. Moving into the community allows them not to have to stress to stage it, to keep it clean, to make sure everything's in line, the estate sales. It's just one less thing to worry about. So partnering with different companies like yourself, it allows us to have the residents in, get comfortable, get settled, and then they can have their home taken care of.
We found, as Megan said, that it can be very stressful. I think for anybody at any age, moving is stressful, except when you go to college, right? It's all fun and games. Then you get there and realize somebody said, forgot to tell me I had to study. And then that's when mom and dad reminded us, right? We're supposed to study. But it is very stressful for families, and we try to mitigate that, and because the big thing is, if we can get folks focused on the move and the new life at the new community, that really helps them. And once they're moved, then we deal with the house and the estate sale and all the other things that go with that. And we found that works significantly well for people, and after the fact, they tell us all the time that will work best. So Taylor, is there a screening process?
There is, yeah. At most life plan communities, there's a couple prerequisites, if you will, to move into the community. The first is we call it a pre-entrance health exam, but it's a health assessment that's completed by your general practitioner, stating that you're capable of living independently, and then usually our nurse will review that as well. And then there's a financial review. It's a confidential financial data application that you would fill out either with your financial advisor or your accountant. So we look at that as well prior.
So we've been through a lot so far. I want to see if there's any questions. Yes, Lindy, microphone?
I'm awfully grateful to Paul and Lynn for letting me continue to come to these over and over. And there's one thing that's always puzzled me. I'm going to just make this story up. Let's say that 25 or 30 of your residents were all together someplace, and they all got badly hurt. You can just imagine there are various ways of getting badly hurt. And they all needed long-term care or skilled nursing at the same time. But you only have X number of beds. Mm-hmm. And by beds, I mean the skilled people to take care of that many beds. Mm-hmm. and the physical layout. Has that ever happened to either of you? And what are you doing with things like that?
I think the question, just to repeat it, is disaster planning.
Sure. Good question. So for our community, if they had a disaster, they would be going to the hospital, so they may not be all coming back at the same time. If a large amount of them came back, we also have a sister community that's 6 miles from our community. Currently, we have 140 long-term care beds. So, depending on where we were, we would partner with our sister community. If that didn't have space, we would call other communities to help us out in that situation. I think one of the things, just to say this, you know, Taylor and I may be competitors, but we are all in this for the right reason. So all of the communities would gather together, I believe, to help somebody like that. In hurricane situations like that, we are a disaster area because we're inland. So we take in other residents from other communities to help out in those situations.
Yeah, and Lindy, you're funny that you say that, you're grateful that, Paul and Lynn still allow you to come. I think that that's great that you're being proactive and, you know, knowledge is power. So let me say that, first of all. But second of all of these communities have, emergency management plans that are approved by the county, for cases of which that you mentioned, any sort of disasters. And so we all do have, communities that if we needed to evacuate or if we needed assistance, we all have agreements with one another, and those have been overlooked by the county. And, you know, I suppose that we can't take all of the credit, but there are a lot of, actuarialists that work on these numbers to determine the appropriate amount of beds needed for the entire population of the community. And so that's kind of how we develop that bed count too, to ensure that we are contractually holding up to our end, which is that, you know, we'll provide you care for the remainder of your life. And that's also why, you know, we very rarely take non-residents into short-term rehab. Sometimes we do if we have the bed availability, but we do have to be mindful of the fact that if one of our residents or a lot of our residents needed that level of care, that we would need to make sure that we had room available, so.
And I think also, your point is the general point about disaster planning. We hear all the bad news on the news. We don't hear the good news. So during the hurricanes and of recent years, we heard about all the disasters that happened. And certainly they take retirement communities and throw them right up at the top because it's good press to throw that up there and talk about grandma and grandpa and how horrible it was. They don't tell you about the other 99% of the communities where everything went okay. It wasn't perfect. My gosh, we had a major Hurricane Charlie, for example, had a horrible major hurricane. But the residents were taken care of. The residents did fine. They got their meals. And it may have been uncomfortable because of some electrical issues, because we all had those. But it worked okay because they had plans. And you have to have them approved by the county. The state gets involved in a lot of these. And they have, over recent years, improved and made the plans more strict.
Certainly,
Right?
yeah, especially after Hurricane Irma, yeah, there's a lot of.
Because I remember you guys were all tied up in redoing plans after Irma. So,
One more thing with
yes.
that. We also, and I know that we do, everybody does this, every year, every 6 months, we update our resident information, emergency contact, the evacuation plan, everybody, because some people are on oxygen. And so, as Taylor said, we would do things internally as well as doing things externally with the states and the government.
Bill?
A quick question. I looked at like the Mayflower's brochure, and I mean, it says like, you know, a certain amount, you know, for the buy-in. But like, now, like you say, how many years would you have to have set up to pay the rent, you know, to be accepted? Like 5 years worth of rent, 10 years worth of rent?
So the question
You know, in
is,
other words, I mean, you know, if you've got the buy-in, you make the buy-in, how much are you gonna have to be accepted?
so I think where he's getting at is when you're looking at the financial capability, the criteria on the financial capability.
Yeah, you know, it's really case by case. To be honest, we put it into like an actuarial software, that kind of runs 2,000 different scenarios. And Megan could probably, tell me if she's heard this, but I've heard people say that if you have like 1.5 times the entrance fee and 2 times the monthly fee. I mean, there are general assumptions that can be made, but remember, this all is going off to your age, your gender, the square footage of the residence that you're looking at. So it's a difficult question to answer very generally. So I guess, if I were to be vague, I would say that some communities say you should have 2 times the monthly fee. Would you say?
I do,
something?
it's two, we use, at our community, we use 2 times and 2 times. What I can say is we use.
Yeah, but I mean, for how many years?
Well, that's, so we use an actuarial program, so,
Okay.
so when we put
So
that
that'll
in
be
there.
based on your age and your
And
level
sometimes,
of health,
yes.
yeah.
and sometimes people have more assets and income or reverse, and so all of that is taken into consideration. So as a guesstimate, that's what I always say is a baseline, and we take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah, so if somebody's 90,
Right.
we've moved several folks 90
Right.
recently,
Yeah.
versus 70, it's different numbers.
And also, if you have a long-term care policy, that can factor in as well. So it just depends.
So, Xander, you had a question?
Yeah. You had mentioned, you know, the unforeseens and medical
Mhm.
issues that can come up. Well, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I gotta tell you, there's psychiatric unknowns. People who all of a sudden become psychotic in their dementia, they have delusions, their medication can create delirium.
Right.
How do you deal with these psychiatric issues in the population of your residents?
So the question is about not just physical issues, but we're dealing with psychiatric and dementia being a really big piece of that.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I think that much like other communities, we all have resources that we rely heavily on. And these past 2 years have been difficult, you know, with COVID, and I think that that goes for everyone. And so we've made sure that we've relied on our social workers that we have at our community to reach out to all the residents, even in independent living, to see how they're doing. We also have other resources and providers, like neuropsychologists on board, and, you know, of course, licensed clinical social workers like yourself, to make sure that we're giving all the residents, not only the care that they deserve, but keeping them safe as well. But you're absolutely right, there are so many unknowns, and especially with dementia and Alzheimer's, so that's, you know, very, that's something that could certainly happen, yeah.
And the short answer, I'm sorry?
Can I ask a backup to that?
Sure.
As far as the medical screening,
Mhm.
right? So let's say you're screening with a couple,
Mhm.
and one of the members of the couple currently has a diagnosis of a, you know, psychiatric, which is being treated and everything is fine. But there's all those kinds of issues. Are there any pre-existing medical or psychiatric conditions that would exclude somebody being able to sign a contract?
So the question has to do with, I mean, we've talked about medical, but particularly psychiatric dementia issues that would prohibit somebody from coming in.
Our contracts are different, which is gonna determine our screening processes are different as well, because of the contract styles and lifestyle we're offering. So I know in our community, if somebody has a dementia diagnosis, that depending on where they are in that journey, could be really challenging for them to live in independent living. Psychiatric, I mean, we've had residents that have Lewy bodies dementia, but it's a very early diagnosis and manageable. So we have that conversation up front with them, and the nurse letting them know that, you know, you're doing okay, but as part of the process, if things escalate, that we're gonna have to look for other options in regards to going to a higher level of care. So we have those conversations, and I think in the health diagnosis, you can see that. But depending on the type of contract is really gonna determine what your health and financial requirements are.
Yeah, I would say you bring up a really good point, because with everyone here today, I would assume that, you know, this means that you're being proactive in your plan. And there are times when people can wait too long, and I'm sure that Megan would agree with me that that's the worst part about our job, is when we have to tell someone that they don't qualify. So it's important that if a life plan community ends up being a part of your plan, that you don't wait too long to potentially disqualify you. For us at the Mayflower, I wouldn't say that there are certain pre-existing conditions. I mean, if you're speaking of, you know, just mental illness as a whole, I wouldn't say that there's anything included in there that would exclude you from moving in. Just like if you had a pre-existing diagnosis or something of cancer. But we are very we really have to look into the dementia and Alzheimer's diagnosis. Even if the other spouse is independent and doesn't have the diagnosis, we wanna make sure that the household is always safe. And so if the one spouse ended up going to the hospital and having an acute episode, leaving the other spouse with dementia or Alzheimer's, alone, we wanna make sure that that's a safe scenario for them. So, I would say that in general, it's important to not wait too long and miss out on the opportunity to be a part of a life plan community.
And I think the short answer to a lot of these concerns is, people are far better off in the community than they are at home. And we're gonna use the disaster situation, a hurricane comes through. I know when Hurricane Charlie came through, we had 3 back-to-back, right? The last one I'll never forget was Jeanne, Jeanne, which was my mother's name. And I knew it was gonna hit Florida, because my mom is the most unpredictable person in the world. That thing went out in the Atlantic and turned around and came straight back. And that was mom all the way. But the point being, we were without power for 13 days. We were still in our home. We became the caregiver for several neighbors who were in their late 80s and 90s. And 2 of them ended up in the hospital with heat exhaustion. And one of the 2 died a few weeks later because of the heat exhaustion. Had they been living in a community, they would have lived another, many years of their life. But because they weren't in a community. With my mother, after her husband died, she was by herself, and a lot of things went wrong, and there was no one there to help her. Mom had problems with UTIs, and we'd find her, and she'd be completely delirious, didn't know she had a problem, and then once she moved into a community, they'd call us and say, we're sending your mom out for some testing because we think that she's starting to have a problem. So they were catching things ahead of time. So, as I said, people are far better off in a community where they're protected to a very large extent, and certainly watched over and taken care of. So I trust we got that answered somewhat. Yes, Cheryl.
I'm curious
Wait a second.
I'm curious to the size of your communities, population-wise at any given time.
So I can tell you that we have almost 900 residents on campus. 83% of those are independent living.
And we have about 300-ish residents.
How many are IL?
200 plus.
So the vast majority are independent living. So we talked about the contract, and we talked about the round numbers of dollars and so on. What if somebody gets to the community, and I want to preface this with, it depends on what the contract says, but in general terms, if somebody gets in the community and they're there for a period of time and it's just not working?
So if they're not happy, we want them to be happy, first of all. So we try and work that out. But if they choose to leave, for our contract, if it's within a certain amount of time since they moved in, and there may be a refund, so we prorate the difference, so you don't lose the money. After a certain time frame, for us it's 4 years, there would be nothing refunded. But again, it depends on if you wanted, on your contract style, if you had a, refundable option of 50 or 90%, it would be a different scenario. So, I don't know I'm trying to think of how to answer that best. So yes, it is refundable.
So some contracts have a capital preservation?
Yes, capital preservation. So there's a traditional entry fee for us of 50% and 90%. In the traditional entry fee, within 4 years, if you want to move out here or 18 months later, we would prorate the difference of the 4 years and refund that to you or to your state. 50 or 90%, you could live there 5 years, 10 years, and decide you don't like it, and you get 50% or 90% back.
And Taylor, similar situation?
Yeah, almost exactly the same.
Okay, so there is a means for capital preservation. Some people want to preserve that for their estate. The entrance fee would be higher the more they wanted to preserve, right? And so there's ways to keep it lower without having capital preservation. And do you have another question, Lindy?
Yeah,
Wait just a second. Jeff will yell at me if I don't use the microphone.
just based on a question a few minutes ago, I just wanna make sure that we all understand the down payment has nothing whatsoever to do with that monthly rate that you pay, except for the fact that the more expensive the monthly, the place you go to live within your community, the higher that down payment is. But the down payment is not gradually dribbled away by monthly rental, right?
They're two
It's separate from it.
Correct.
It's completely separate.
Correct.
So
Thank you, ladies.
the question is any portion of the down payment go toward paying rent?
No,
Okay.
completely separate.
So what is it used for?
The monthly service fee, the services.
No, not the monthly.
Okay, so the entrance fee,
The entrance fee.
which you collect
Mhm,
with residents over time,
mhm.
and I'm gonna throw this out to both of you. What does the community do with that? That's a good question.
It is. You know, I always explain it this way, and Megan touched on this. The entrance fee does not mean that you own the residence that you're living in. If you think of it more of an insurance transaction and less of a real estate transaction, this is almost similar to purchasing some sort of insurance policy. So the entrance fee is pre-funded, guaranteed future care. It's guaranteeing your placement and at a very discounted rate from the market rate. The monthly fee is your services and amenities that the community is providing you. And in each community that could vary, the services and amenities can vary. But what Lindy was saying, it doesn't matter what refund plan you would pick, the monthly fee is the same. So, if you were looking at, just for round number's sake, a 1-bedroom, and maybe the 90% refund is $300,000 on that 1 bedroom, the 50% refund could be $200,000. And then the plan zero, as we call it, that there's no refund after 4 years, maybe that's $100,000. But regardless of which refund you pick, the monthly fee is the same. Is that how it works for you too, Mary?
Mhm.
Yes, okay.
They also, when you look at the entry fee, it goes to a lot of the capital improvements in the community. And you have to look over time, you know, you're improving the place in which you're living. So a lot of that entry fee can go to that as well. But the monthly service fee really does take care of your service and amenities.
Thank you.
Okay, so I throw this out to both of you. Taylor, what would best describe people that choose to move to the Mayflower?
I would say a planner, somebody who has been proactive, done their research, typically looks at more than one community. Someone who wants to make sure that they're in not only control of their plan, but they're making the decision for themselves. And, you know, yes, they might have adult children, but they don't want their child making the decision for them. So generally, they're planners. Some of the times, I would say, or if not most of the time, they're social people or people who want to be involved in a community type environment and really recognize and value what a life plan community brings from a social standpoint, personal standpoint, and even a financial standpoint.
Megan?
I agree.
I think Taylor hit on and Megan too, because I mean, we work with these guys all the time. I'm gonna come back to you. And the key is the word planner. And folks, if we don't plan, somebody's gonna plan for us. And those of you who are regulars have heard me say this many times, that my parents didn't plan. So Paul got a plan. And that involved an airplane flight, telling them exactly what they were gonna do, because I had to get back to work, and my children, and my job, and my family, and the things I did, because I had Boy Scouts every Monday night, I had to be back for that. So, they got to do what I told them. I didn't like that, but I didn't have any choice, because they didn't plan. I'll take another example. Lynn's parents were big planners. And when Lynn's father died, there was a plan in place. And her mother, they'd already had a deposit in at Westminster Lucerne, downtown Orlando. And within a few months, the apartment came available, and Lynn's mother moved there, and she was there for 14, 15 years. And was a wonderful for her, it was wonderful for us. So planners are who goes to, your types of communities. And they go there purposely and enjoy it because they do. So there was a question back.
Yes, if they come to your community with and choose the smallest amount of, amount of money to pay, and in the long run, after 2 years, they think they have the wrong plan, can they change to have a new contract with you, or
So-
not?
So if they enter under a given contract, and want to change it after the fact, or is that an ability to do that?
So when you say change contract, are you talking about the refundable option or size of where
Yes,
they're
if they,
living?
yes, if they want to have a greater refundable option, or if they want to have more square footage, or whatever it is, can they have that? Or have a long-term care plan in,
Sure.
in this contract, if maybe they thought they didn't need it in the future, and are they able to change the contract?
So talking about changing the size of where you're living, twofold answer in our community. So one, the contract style, I'll go there first. Once, you cannot change your refundable option once you sign the original contract. When it comes to changing accommodations, one thing that we have worked hard on is finding the place you want to live first. Because I don't wanna have a resident move in and say that I wanna move across for a better view. So we don't do that. I wanna find the right place for them first. If there's a situation where somebody lives in a larger apartment and wants to move to a smaller apartment for whether finances or loss of a spouse, we absolutely work with our residents, to do that. Same thing, they may pay a difference in the entry, or not going down. If somebody wanted to change to move to a larger one, they may pay additional money for the entry fee in our community. So it's an individual basis, but I really try to work hard on finding what you want the first time. And I think that as Taylor and I work with these residents, it's the relationships we build, and understanding what their plan is to make sure that we get that right the first time.
And this is a process, it's not a go in on Tuesday, and it's not buying a car. It's going in and they're learning about you, and what your needs are, and what your goals are, and what your lifestyle is. And that's how it works, and getting to know the community. These guys are not trying to sell, they're trying to find the best place for a family member. If it's not you, if it's one of your parents, for example. And I really stress that there's a lot of counseling going on in this process. Is that fair?
I always say you're on a journey, and I want to be your partner on the journey, because it is a process. Some people have done a lot of planning and can make a decision sooner than others, but that's what we're here for, because as Taylor started to say, coming out today and getting the facts makes you more knowledgeable and more powerful in your decisions.
Yeah, and I would say to that point too, when I sit down and talk to people, I constantly reference their plan, and I let them know, your plan may not end up including, the Mayflower, and that's okay. There are a lot of different options out there, and there's an option that's going to be perfect for you as well, but I feel like I enjoy empowering seniors and adult children to be proactive and forming their plan. And if that includes our community, then great, but not always. So.
The planners are, in our experience, and we're somewhat on the outside of it, that are the ones that make the happiest residents. Because it's not an emergency, they planned it, it's a stressful event no matter what. But through the systems that we use, great transitions and working with communities, when we're moving somebody that way, it's wonderful to see the consequence of it. If it's an event that caused them to move, they're probably not going to one of your communities anyway, because probably their health has declined to the point where they can't go. And let's stress on that for a minute.
I have a quick story as you're talking about that, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. I was working with the brother and sister of a potential resident from the east part of Florida and East Coast, and eventually got to meet the prospect and worked with her for 4 or 5 months, and she made the decision to do it. She came in with her girlfriend, and she was in the process of moving in to show her the space, and she loved it. So I hadn't seen that friend and asked the resident how her friend was doing, and she said, oh, she's coming up next week. Happened to see them in the hallway, and her friend stopped me and said, thank you for giving me my friend back, because it made such a life-changing experience for her. Her whole, the resident now, the whole face lit up. I mean, it has been life-changing to be in a community, to have the services, to make friends, the whole environment, and I get chills talking about it. But to know that we've made that difference on the front end in what we do working with families, but then when they come in and enjoy the staff and everything around, what a difference it makes for people's lives. They wish, sometimes they wish they had done it sooner, and everybody's journey is different and finds their path in the community, but it's really, it is life-changing.
I will say, our experience for Lynn and I has been that 100% of the time, they say to us, because we stay in touch, we don't just get somebody new to the community and leave. Should have done it 5 years sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Should have done it 3 years sooner.
Mhm.
Should have done it before I had my knee replaced. Whatever it is.
Yeah. I was showing a potential resident around the community, and we ran into a male resident, and he said, you know, I've lived here for X amount of time, and he said, I have to tell you, I did not want to come. My wife wanted us to come, and he said now he said, I can honestly say I should have done it sooner. And it seems to be a theme amongst at least our residents that say I should have done this sooner. They also end up saying too, they didn't need all the square footage that they thought that they were gonna need, which is always interesting to hear as well. So, yeah, I feel like too, it's, our residents always say, this has expanded their life instead of retracting their life, moving to a community, and it's a sensitive subject, and I don't know that, people have always dreamed of this day, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I mean, our residents say it better than we can, and are quite frankly busier than myself, and all of their adult children will say it's tough to fit into my mom's schedule or to my dad's schedule.
And you're exactly right, and that has been our experience with personally with our parents.
Mhm.
When they got into the community, it was, my mother said to me one time, stop bothering me, I'm too busy. And I said, thank you. and I stopped worrying about it. But I wanna touch on something. You talked about adult children. We've had these conversations many times. There's naysayers out there. And sometimes it's adult children. And what do the adult children fear about a parent leaving?
Losing the money sometimes.
Yes.
Where's my inheritance going? It's one of the things that people always talk about. And, that is probably the biggest thing. The other thing is, fear is they don't know enough about it or the facts. And I think once they sit down and understand the value and the benefits rather than just the money and the features makes a big difference.
And one of the reasons I really wanted to hammer on the life plan and the fact that the fee structure is not future value or that day value. You're paying discounted fees in the future for advanced things. It's probably a lesser fee for them to go this way.
Right.
So if the kids are worried about inheritance, there's probably more money left over moving to one of your communities. We see this with financial planners who do not understand the concept, right?
All the time, and it's really frustrating because we know that people have relationships with whomever, hairdressers or financial planner. And if they don't have the facts and just think about, sometimes when we mention a continuing care, life plan community, people go directly to assisted living or nursing. And that's not what we are as a community, and they automatically assess those fees based on that little information. So we spend, I know, a lot of time educating professionals about this industry. Whether they choose us or another community, it's just to help them understand what it is we do. We have lost prospective residents because financial planners don't have the correct information.
And our partners were chosen very purposely. Now, they've got to want to work with us too. But we have a board certified elder law attorney who works with our people. Our financial folks understand the concept of this. So when you're talking to them, and I encourage you to use these folks, because they understand what it costs for long-term care. They understand how to fund long-term care. They understand how these communities work and how it will handle their money. So it's very important versus, I don't know, I'm going to pick on somebody. You know, the person at the table at the corner of the office on the main bank on you know, Main Street, Orlando, when you walk in. They're there to sell you stuff. They're not there to plan your finances. And they're gonna give you the wrong answer every time. Didn't mean to get on a podium about that, but it's been a real problem. So, when people are looking at communities, do you recommend they bring family members?
I think that you should bring someone you trust. I mean, whether that's a family member or a friend, I think always having another set of eyes and ears with you is helpful. And you should certainly look at more than one community as well. And it can get confusing too, right? So I think it helps bringing someone with you that you trust, and trying not to go back too far. But when the adult children really understand the concept of a life plan community, I've had adult children say, you know, right in front of me, Mom, this is the greatest gift you could have ever given me. So I think that there's also that piece to it as well. And sorry, I think there's a question.
Yes.
This may be a complicated question that you may or may not be able to answer, but you referenced the fact that the monthly fee is less because, you know, because of the entrance fee and the structure of the contract. Is there any way that you could say what percentage, for example, if someone is in memory care now and they're not in your community and they're paying, say, $5,000 to $6,000 a month, what would be yours, for example, would yours be like 2/3 of that, 1/3 of that? Similarly, assisted living, if someone's paying $4,000 a month for assisted living, in your structure, I know it depends on the square footage of the apartment and sometimes the acuity level of that person's care, but is there any sort of, just to give us a sense of what the savings as to just going in independent?
So the question is if there's a way to put a number to it or percentage in general terms, in a range would be what would, in today's world, somebody going in would be saving.
So I'll say the market rate for assisted living, just going across the board, could be anywhere between $6,000 and $8,000. Memory care can be anywhere from, you know, 6 to 9, depending on different levels of care.
And that's per month.
That is per month. And that's kind of nationally. I know for our communities, they're a little bit different. So, you know, as a resident, you may pay, rather than 5 to, or 6 to 8, you may pay 4.5 to 5.5. So, and then, you know, the market rate could be $600 to $6,500 rather than being a resident. I also think it depends on if you're looking at a freestanding assisted living versus a continuum of care. Those rates may change. But yes, it's probably, I don't know, maybe, I guess a quarter less to half sometimes.
Right, that's what I'm looking for, sort of a range.
And the other thing that's important is once someone's in the community here, they're set. A person who's in the free market trying to find a place, it depends on what's available. And we ran into this personally with my mother. I didn't know it. This is 20 years ago. I didn't know what a continuing care was. And we had Mom in a place that was convenient for one of my brothers to see her. And so when she couldn't be there anymore, we're shopping. And wherever they could take her is where she went. It wasn't where we wanted her to be. It was where there was a room available. And so we had no choice in what the price was. Make sense? So Anything else on bringing family members along for, like Megan?
I mean, I agree too, we do a lot, sometimes we have many children coming in, you know, to come in, or there's, one in charge, but I agree, bringing in somebody in to help you, and agree that, you know, we always suggest, go look at communities, because if we're not the right one, there's another one out there to find, so.
So when do you think the best age, I throw this out to both of you, for someone to make the transition?
It honestly depends, because, we have people that moved in their late sixties. So, I don't know, I think everyone, their plan is different, and for a lot of people, they value and understand getting in earlier and moving in earlier, or they start to look at their family history and, you know, their parents and grandparents and diagnoses and even like age of death, and start to think, it's so unpredictable, I think I'm gonna move in earlier. So it's really hard to say. I mean, my father just became a senior, and I'm obviously pushing him to form some sort of plan now and to consider these things now. Whether he moves in, you know, a year from now or 7, 8 years from now, I think that he should start formulating his plan, because I always say it boils down to 3 options. You know, you could remain at home and arrange in-home care, you could live with your children, or you can move to some type of senior living community. And if the first 2 options aren't looking doable for you, then you should start your research now on different senior living communities and see what fits for you.
Quick question, how many want to live with one of your kids? I don't see anybody jumping up and down on that.
I mean, I always say I would take my father in, but I need to maintain marriage, so I don't know that my husband would be that.
So the answer is no, she won't take her father in. But think about that. What are we qualified to do? What are we gonna do if something goes wrong? We don't have that qualification, so that's taken on a huge task. And if in this country prior to World War II, a 3-generation household was somewhat the norm, it's not that way anymore. Our country has changed dramatically. So I think for somebody who can, certainly people can consider anything, but to be serious about thinking that a parent's gonna live with them, it's really not practical on any level. I think the short answer is don't wait too long, because they have to be independent to move into a continuing care community, right? And so for each of you, I want to see what closing comments you might have, and then we're going to open up for more questions. So Megan? Taylor? This is a trick question.
Yeah, I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm happy that so many of you are here, respect the fact that you're here, gaining this knowledge and asking questions, because that's what it's all about. And the fact that, you know, 7, 8 years from now, we're gonna experience the greatest demographic shift in history with the baby boomers, you know, doubling, it really just means that soon the demand for these type of communities will really exceed the supply. So a planner and somebody who knows what they want will get exactly what they want. They'll get the 2-bedroom facing east on the 6th floor if that's what you're looking for. So again, I really respect the fact that you're here, and I think that you should continue to ask questions and formulate your plan. So thank you for having me.
And 4.2 million people in Florida are over the age 65. It's 22% of the state population, and that's growing. So figure it out. It's over 2 million people who are over the ages of, it's 1.7, I think, are over the age of 75. They're going to be in line for communities. So if you want to stand in a really, really long line, if you wait and don't plan, then you're going to be in that really, really long line.
I have a question for you all. How many of you have visited a continuing care retirement community? Okay, I see a handful. So I think one of the things in closing is, it's not what you think it is if you haven't been there. There are so many opportunities, and the stigma I think that our industry has really been synonymous with nursing home. And as Taylor mentioned with the boomers coming on, we are always redefining our programming and our units and our growth to meet the population and their needs. One of the things that we've done is unbundle some services. So if you don't want to eat in the dining room every day, you don't have to. So, but the environment when you walk in is the intangible that Taylor and I can talk about it, but until you walk in and feel it, it's hard to explain. So I really encourage you, getting the facts and knowledge is to to actually go to the visual and see that experience no matter what age you are. I have people coming in, I don't know if you do, but in their 50s, or they had a friend whose parents just passed away and they're like, I have no plan, or something triggers them to come in, and that's always, as a planner, planners are looking, but sometimes something triggers in their outside life that triggers them to look as well. And so we welcome you to come visit our communities, and all the communities around town to do that. And I think the biggest thing is, as Taylor said, is don't wait. The benefits and the value really outweigh the unknown. So thank you for having us. I know we're here to answer any other questions.
So I'm gonna open up for questions, but I wanna say a couple of things. I believe we have the community questionnaire back. Okay, we don't have it, but we will send it out with the email. I'll send everybody a copy of the community questionnaire, so when you go, you can have questions. And they welcome those questions. And the beauty of it is, you're gonna ask each community the same question. So you've got a comparison. The second thing is, when you do visit a community, I encourage you to go 15, 20 minutes early. Sit in the lobby. Watch what goes on. You're not gonna sit there very long before somebody sits down next to you and starts talking. And they're gonna tell you how much they love the community, and they're not a plant, okay? They're just a community resident that come up and they see somebody, it's a new face. And this happens to me all the time, because I very purposely go early. If I'm going to visit one of these guys, I go early, and the residents come out and start talking to me, are you moving here? What about the community? I love it, you'll love living here. And I'll say, well, I'm just here to visit Megan or Taylor. Well, are you helping somebody move here? They're gonna love it. And so you'll learn a lot about the community that way, and you'll see the interaction of people and all the activities. So I encourage that a lot. So what we're gonna do is open up the questions. So we gotta, go ahead, Cheryl, remember your question.
I imagine, so you've got the initial entry fee, so you can't raise that in a contract, but do the monthly go up yearly, the monthly rental fees go up yearly, and about a percentage of what would you say how much you do?
So what are the increases on average on rental fees?
So national average is usually 3 to 4%. I will say with COVID last year was unprecedented for every industry, so ours went up a little bit more. I will also say that the resident rate increase is different from the market rates each year. And that's determined from us from the corporate office, but residents, it's typically 3 to 4% has been our average.
So to put that in context, Florida law allows your taxes to go up at least 3% a year. Your utility bills go up 3% a year, or whatever they go up. Your homeowner's insurance, guys help us, that's going up. Your grocery bills, you're not gonna have a lot of grocery bills because you're gonna be eating meals there. So if you start taking apple or comparison of things, your expenses are far more controlled in the community than they are outside of the community. Your utility bill, as I said, is gone. Think of how much money you pay a month for utility. If you have a swimming pool, think what that costs. What it costs to mow the yard, all those things. All that stuff's going away.
It also goes to based on the cost of living. So if you look at that as a national average and guideline too.
Okay, and was there a question? Yes, Sandra.
You might not want to answer it, but I'm just curious if you have your own contracts. Are you moving in to one of your type of communities in your future?
So the question is, which community are you guys going to live in? I mean,
You have to be 62. I was just
Oh, you
talking-
do?
Yes.
Okay.
State law. So I was talking with Taylor. She's got a 5-year-old. My youngest is 20, 24 and 26, and I've been doing this 30 years. And I say to my prospects, if I could have moved in and they would have done diapers 26 years ago.
I will say I've worked in every level of senior living, in skilled nursing, and assisted living, and memory care, and now life plan community. And after, working in all those different levels, I would most definitely, in my future, choose a life plan community. Yeah.
So, Lynn Henderson, would you move to a life plan community? Is your mic on?
Oh, that was fine. Yeah, I think that after having the experience with our parents and seeing the value of the life plan community,
I know with my side, parents did not move to the life plan community. They waited too long. So an event caused them, as I said earlier, to move. Their health would prohibit them from being in a life plan community. The escalation of cost of their medical care was unbelievable. And that cost would have been controlled in a life plan community. And it wasn't tens of thousands of dollars, it was huge. And then with Lynn's mother, it was all controlled when she went there. And I think that we're big proponents of life plan communities just because of what we do. So I want to wrap up with a couple of things. Thank you all for coming. I challenge you to bring somebody the next time. We really appreciate you all being here. You'll get a copy of the video. Did we try to sell you anything? Good, because that's what we want to do. A couple of things, a closing quote I have. If you like things just the way they are, take a picture for your scrapbook. And that's Tom Selleck as Commissioner Frank Reagan on Blue Bloods. I heard that this week. And if you like things the way they are, take a picture for your scrapbook. They're going to change, aren't they? And finally, we cannot always see where the road leads, but God promises there's something better up ahead. We just have to trust in Him. And that's Psalms 56:3. God bless you. Thank you for coming, and have a great week.